Welcome to the RSP cast. I'm Matt Waldman, and joining me today is Will Hewlett. Will Hewlett is a high school football coach. He is also a quarterback coach. If you're a longtime listener or watcher, then you've seen Will and I break down some film of guys like Connor Cook and Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston, and we've gone back a little bit of a ways. So
Way back.
yeah, for sure. So thanks so much for joining me. You know, with the eve of the NFL draft, I thought it'd be fun for us to be able to get together and talk a little bit about coaching quarterbacks, especially in the light of, you know, you've worked with Brock Purdy, Anthony Richardson, Caleb Williams this year, Austin Reed. I was about to say Anthony Reed. So you know, a number of guys. So just to to get into it, I mean, what have you learned about coaching quarterbacks, especially the differences, say, between coaching high school, college, and the pro game?
Yeah, I think maybe there's no real direct answer with that. There's a lot of things. I mean, I think there's two worlds that I live in. My high school coaching world. By the way, I'm representing my buddies, Union Red Hawks, Coach Dub Maddox out there, but I coach at St. Augustine High School in Florida. And, you know, for me on the football field, you know, Monday through Friday, you know, Friday Night Lights, I'm a true quarterback coach. And I think in the sense of, like, what is a quarterback coach? You know, am I the same guy when I'm on the field with Brock or Caleb or Anthony or any of those guys? It's a little bit of a different structure, and I think there's and I actually, this is something that's come up this offseason quite frequently as we kind of navigate the space of, you know, working with NFL teams and college teams. You know, how does someone that trains quarterbacks on the outside integrate and help and collaborate with a team? Versus, you know, what the actual role of a quarterback coach is. Because I know a lot of people tend to think it's like, well, why do these quarterbacks work with quarterback coaches outside of their teams when they have a quarterback coach? And so I think the best way to describe it is that a quarterback coach on a team maybe should be called a quarterback coordinator. And not to take away from the actual coaching side of things, but really the focus is scheme, and it's the scheme that's funneled down. If the quarterback coach isn't the OC, it's making sure we're funneling down the information from the offensive coordinator, and obviously there's a level of technique-driven coaching that is still in the actual game of football on the field, but I think it would be less than people would realize. You know, I think there's minor things that we're going to be focusing on, and it's all relative to timing. So the quarterback coach on the field for a team, you know, we're focusing on progressions, we're focusing on timing, you know, where they're anchoring their eyes. They're coaching the game through the lens of the quarterback. Where QB coach will, where I really call myself a on-field mechanics coach. And I reason I call myself that is because technically speaking, I'm not a true biomechanics coach, even though that's a nice little thing that a lot of guys tend to throw around. I have a biomechanist on the staff.
Tom Gormely, right?
Tom Gormely. Yeah, exactly. So I think I have a deep level understanding for someone that's not classically educated in that world. But my role is coaching. You know, when they've got a football in their hand, that's my job. And when you take the football out of their hand, that's Tom's job. So I think the biggest thing I've learned is that the off-season development track is really there to get them in a space when they go into fall that they're firing on all cylinders, and then the actual quarterback coach / coordinator can kind of take it from there in terms of you know, funneling the offense through there. You know, the less mechanical coaching you can do as a on-field you know, team quarterback coach, the better. You don't want to be coaching your guy off of mechanics at week 7, like, you just don't. And so I think that's truly the biggest takeaway I've learned for the past 20 years or so of doing this.
You know, that makes sense. Whereas the NFL guy is really like, okay, we're expecting as close to a finished product as we can, so we can get out of the way of the
Yeah.
of the details, and and just funnel our game plan. And so I could see, like, I love the explanation you had about really it's like, okay, how do we maybe shorten a drop here so we get the ball out in this particular situation, or what are some things that maybe you can do as a slight adjustment that's going to help the game plan or the play, as opposed to how do we make you more accurate? How do we make what you're doing more scalable and getting the ball out quicker? All the things that you guys do in the off season.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what you'll see is some of the better coaches out there. I think the best coaches do their best with molding their system to the talent that they have, right? I think obviously you have your system, you want to run your system a certain particular way. And I think the best examples of that are when you see, Brock Purdy fits perfectly into Kyle Shanahan's system. Brock runs the system how Kyle envisioned it. Shane Steichen with the Colts. Anthony is built in a lab for his offense. Like, it's exactly what he wants. And absolutely, like, he was able to have success with Gardner Minshew, who's also someone that our team works with. And they changed what they did. They took a lot of the RPO level reads out. The dynamic of the offense changed. And I think that's the true role where you see like elite coaching happening, is that they adapt to the personnel, to the system, and there's going to be nuances and differences between drops and timing and throw velocity and throw choice. And so the best coaches work the best with the personnel adjustments, I think.
Well, since you brought those two guys up, really all three, I'd love if you don't mind sharing, it would be great to hear something that maybe about Brock and Anthony and Gardner in terms of your takeaways of working with them that maybe people may not see just from as an average fan.
Yeah, I think and Gardner primarily works with Danny Thompson, who's one of our coaches, but I've been around it. He's been here multiple off seasons, and then our motion capture analysis partner also works with Gardner frequently. Gardner's at a level in his career where he's probably going into, I don't think what year, it's going to be 6 or 7, somewhere around that, right? And he's at a very unique stage that I think it's every quarterback's goal, is where they truly have a deep understanding of how their body works, how it's all about optimization. I was watching a clip this morning on Twitter. It was Kirk Cousins throwing a pitch, and we sent it back and forth in a group text, and I was just admiring the beautiful flow of this throw that he had. That was just, and I cringe using the word flow. It's one of the most overused words in QB coaching, but it was just a really well sequenced, natural baseball throw. Looks different than his football throw, and kind of remarking on that, like, he's at a point in his career, and I don't think he's had a lot of individualized coaching, and there's probably still room for optimization there, in terms of, like, our goal as a technician is to optimize your skill set to the best of its ability. And Gardner's at a point where, he's moving into other levels in his game where, he's wanting to understand how to make particular throws under pressure and produce situations. Wants to find all the little failure points in his game. Whereas, even though Brock just led his team to the Super Bowl, which is still crazy when he comes back this offseason, it's just Brock. And different level of famous, but he hasn't changed a bit. He's still getting back into the swing of things where he's, working on re-optimizing his throw and his body. Quite frankly, he's had one of the longest, 2-year spans of, from his final game at Iowa State, that next Monday, he's on the field with us. We always talk about the rookie offseason. Going into the NFL is the longest offseason of your life. And the poor guy, in the playoffs, has a UCL injury, and so there's no time. He didn't have any time off that offseason. So it just kept going. And so he finally got some time off this offseason and got to kind of recharge and let the body relax. But he was so eager to get back at it. So he's at a point right now where, where we kind of approach the off season, there's peaks and valleys. We undulate the volume and the intensity level, and he was throwing on the field at the same time as Caleb was, and Caleb had been training that entire off season, and he's kind of at a different stage. Even though Brock is heading into OTAs, Caleb's going to have rookie OTAs. That's slightly different stages, but really Brock needs to be the most optimized when fall camp rolls along, and so does Caleb. It's been really, really fun to get kind of knock the dust off Brock and get that rolling again. And he's eager to get back this summer and continue to perfect his craft. Just off the cuff, like working with Brock this off season, some of the areas that you could see that he was further along the timeline, and you see it in his gameplay. Just his pure understanding of timing and ball placement and anticipation, and it's elite. It's special. It's very special.
That Bengals game where he came under a lot of criticism. I watched that game and I was so impressed with the ball placement overall. I mean, there were some mistakes that happened, but watching him, and I thought him and Burrow was one of the best games I saw that year from a standpoint of just confidence of timing to read the leverage of what the defenders were doing and fitting the ball in there. There were some of the best throws I saw all year were those two guys in that game.
No doubt. Well, I think the thing I love about Brock is that, and we're getting to see the entertaining side of him now with all the commercials coming out, which I love seeing him do that stuff. It cracks me up. But and I think his teammates have talked about it. But that guy's he's a dog on the field, man. He has got an edge to him, and he's got enough rogue in him where he's going to do some things every game where the coaches on the sideline are going to be, what's he doing? Oh, that's what he's doing. Great, touchdown. So kind of the no, yes plays, which I think that's the differentiator in his game. Is the game management part of his game is elite. And the game-changing part of his game is elite, where he's able to, at the right time when they need it, or even just make a play bigger than it, was set up to be. And I think that's the part of his game where playing all those games in college and being in all those situations and all the ups and downs, he's just got the Rolodex of situations in his head, and he's not surprised by anything, and then he's just got an absolute calmness about him that just allows him to operate in the biggest moments out there. And then you've got young Caleb out there, who's you could argue that Brock and Caleb are the two most talked about players in the world in terms of football, which is real interesting. And I can't say enough great things about Caleb. Obviously I'm training him, but I've just been so blessed to be around that kid and just what he's become and what he is and who he is at the core. I can't speak enough for just the attention to detail, the willingness and the wants and the drive to be great. There's no for show there. That's the thing about what we do. We're on the field. There's no cameras. I mean, sometimes there's cameras, but there's no cameras around, and I think, the stories that aren't told enough are the ones like there was a moment on the field this past year where my eldest son, who's a quarterback, he's committed to USF, go Bulls, for this next, he's going to be a senior. And, he comes out to check out how quarterbacks throw sometimes. And we were going to toss it around after for a little bit. And Caleb finished up his workout, and everybody left to go to the next, back to the facility to get their lift in. And Caleb stayed for an hour. I had to kick him off the field out of nowhere. Like, he just, started helping my son and giving him little tips and why don't you try this? And have you tried this? And this works for me. And I just sat back, and I was just the receiver hanging out on the field. And I watched for a little hour in like a 25-mile-an-hour wind gusts and all kinds of stuff, him working with my son. It was just the coolest moment, and it was so genuine. It was so awesome. And, it's something that no one would ever see because it was just the three of us in the middle of some field in in Florida, and just a real genuine, awesome moment. Just speaks to the type of person he is. But then, when you get down to the why he is who he is, he's elite. He is elite on a level with his arm. It's a one-of-one arm. We've got a couple of those. Anthony's got a one-of-one arm. But he does things on the field daily that make everyone kind of just sit back and admire. He's still working on little things, which I love. Like, he is chasing perfection, which you have to do. And just as, some of the things that uniquely to him that we haven't seen before. Like, he's done stuff that we haven't seen before. And I've been doing this for a long time. But
anything that you can mention that you would say, even anecdotally?
And specifically, in our motion capture analysis, one of the ways that we try to do it as much as possible, pending weather and the setup, is that we have them throw the motion capture throws to live routes to make it as much game-like as possible, which, again, live routes is detached from the game substantially, but throwing to a stationary target, you can kind of manipulate some things. So we want to see them at their best and their worst. And some of the data we have is that essentially the average ball speed of an NFL throw sits between around 47 to 49 miles an hour, right? It's the most catchable. Not all balls are going to be thrown that hard, and not all are going to be thrown, some are going to be thrown way harder when you've got, 60-mile-an-hour arms in the NFL. But they live in that zone. So if you throw between that kind of 47, 49 miles an hour on average through your routes, you're playing at an NFL level, essentially. And so most quarterbacks, when we measure in the motion capture, are going to go anywhere from, 46 to 51, 48 to 52. They live in that 4 mile an hour gap of just and it's not that they can't throw it harder, or it's not that they can't throw it softer, but they live there for all. I mean, I'm talking the difference between an 18-yard dagger off a 7-step drop to a slant route, off of a gun catch and throw or 3-step. And Caleb had the largest variance from low velocity to high velocity that we've ever measured. It was 46 to 56 miles an hour. And he maintained spin rate, which is a key with the low velocity ones, is that you maintain spin rate. And it's intentional. Like, one of the parts of his game that he spent, countless hours working on is being able to throw and anticipatory type balls in his training situations, where he can throw a 20-yard sail route 6 different ways. And so he's got the ability to manipulate and throttle his body in a way that we haven't seen before. That probably someone like Mahomes, if we had motion capture of him, would probably have a very similar pattern and control level. And so things like that just make you sit back and admire, what he's able to do. He can gas it up and throw it 70 yards down the field. And then he can loft it over a flat defender before the safety and drop it in, over the shoulder on the sideline. So that was really cool to see that. You could see it in the way that he throws the ball and trains. To the point at the beginning of training, I think it was like the first session. I was like, "Hey, can you what percentage are we living at right here? Can you rip one for me?" He's like, "Sure," and then you just uncorked a freaking out route, just with smoke coming off of it. I was like, "Okay." So I knew he had that. I just wanted to see what your thought was. So it's a part of his game that he's really paid a lot of attention to and has gotten increasingly better at. We're pretty excited about.
Do you see? I mean, what stage are most quarterbacks at where they're able to say? I mean, just from my ignorance of like, where is a quarterback usually at in his career if he's able to say, "Yeah, I've worked on 6 different types of sail routes, or types of throws on sail routes." Where are they normally at in terms of that stage as a thrower? Are they usually an NFL veteran at that point, or would you say that, or they're later in their college career?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. I think it depends. There's some college guys that have a level of that, but usually that's a pretty veteran approach. Um, and and I think there's still a level for Caleb where he's got to go out there on Sundays and figure out which one of those six he's going to use.
Right.
But he's got them.
Yeah.
He's got them all, and there may be only two that he can use in certain games, right? And so he, for us, in terms of what we're doing and how we're doing it, you know, he's as pro ready as anyone that I've ever worked with. And I'm not just talking about just the throwing side of things,
Sure.
and even just the work ethic. You know, I saw just one of the thousand silly analyses that you see online. Someone was like, "Oh yeah, he plays the game like Johnny Manziel plays, so he's not going to have success," which is
Yeah.
arguably one of the laziest evaluations you could ever make.
Yeah.
Um, and but if you kind of dissect it and think about it, sure, there's similarities in the creativity that both of them play with. You know, you click on Johnny's highlights from we do that still. Like let's throw up Johnny Manziel's highlights because they're just
They're insane.
completely
Yeah.
obnoxious and exciting
Yeah.
to to watch. But Johnny didn't succeed in the NFL, self-admittedly, that because he just didn't watch film and he was more interested in other stuff.
Yeah.
Like he worked hard at not doing the
Yeah.
right things.
I had a high grade for Johnny Manziel,
Yeah,
and I thought he was a quarterback. I mean, like, I compared him to, I was a big boxing fan growing up. So I compared him to Ali in the way that Ali didn't do a lot of things traditionally, but he athletically learned what his limits were and where what he could or couldn't get away with. And my thought was, because I didn't know anything that we learned about later on about him,
yeah.
but before that, I thought, well, if everything checks out off the field, this is a guy that might need a year to figure out what he can and can't get away with in the NFL, but he's doing this against future NFL athletes. A lot of this
Yeah.
stuff. It's just a matter of whether he wanted to do it. And I remember watching a game because I was a Browns fan, and the Browns had criticized. There was a criticism from the coaching staff that they wanted him to stay in the pocket. And the next week he was starting against the Steelers, and they were blitzing him, and he stayed in the pocket. It was almost like, I mean,
Yeah.
he kind of thumbed his nose and said, "Yeah, I can do it. Here, you want to see me do it? I'm going to do it." But at the same time, yeah, go ahead.
Players don't bust.
Yeah.
Quarterbacks don't bust in the NFL because they're because of talent. They
Yeah.
just don't. I would make the argument that quarterbacks bust in the NFL because they're lazy or they're not dialed in. Like they're really just they can't get away with what they got away with. Um, they were incorrectly evaluated. They were probably never as elite as what they probably would have been, which again makes you look into the scouting process. Why was Brock drafted last overall, and why is Caleb going to be drafted first overall, right? And so if you redraft Brock, are you drafting him first overall? I mean, you can. I completely understand why quarterbacks like Anthony get drafted very, very high, and why someone like Brock, they can make arguments against him. I have a son who's a 6 foot tall, 185 pound, athletic, pro style quarterback. What's the difference between him and a 5-star quarterback? Um, it's physical potential. You know, ironically, the game still, not even ironically, I think it's just the game is still played on the field, and it's between the ears, and it's the decisions you make under pressure. And so you can overcome all those little, you know, knocks on your potential by just being elite at other things. And I think that's the side of quarterback evaluation that no one, well, I shouldn't say no one, but certain, organizations or people haven't quite figured out yet. Like when we talk about the combine, like combine and pro days, what where does the combine and pro day really stand in the value of true evaluation? Like if it's a pie chart, are we saying that we're going to go to the combine and you're going to flip yourself from a fourth round guy to a first round guy because you were absolutely perfect at the combine, and we're just going to ignore the past 3 years of game film that you have because of a performance in a completely non-contextual, on-air, throwing comebacks where the receivers are slipping over, and it's lazy evaluation. You talk to the smart people in the NFL. There's a value for watching people throw in person. I don't disagree with that. I love to peel it back and see how it works and see how the ball comes out of their hand. But there's 21 other people on the field, and then that's what makes the games, and so it's a small piece of of the puzzle. The same goes with the pro days, right? It's like, where was Caleb's, and poor Zach Wilson just gets thrown under the bus for the throw that he made in his pro day.
Sure.
Where's the Zach Wilson throw, right? And it's like, I mean, turn on YouTube for 30 seconds and Google, look up Caleb highlights, and you can see 15, 20, 30, 100 clips of him doing stuff that you literally can't come up with, that no one else is doing.
Yeah, because you can't integrate all the game situations remotely in a workout. And I mean, you're preaching to the choir here. I mean, and that's something that I'm stating this. I'm not asking you to comment on this guy or anything like that. But I mean, what you talked about in terms of kind of either lazy, or maybe I would even alter the word to say maybe just lacking maturity and age and experience, is like, I remember writing up Drew Lock, and I think that I remember writing him up and saying, I hear all these unfair comparisons to him to Patrick Mahomes that are going on in the media sphere. And when you watch his game, he looks like someone, I think I wrote in the scouting report, it's like he looks like someone who is a very accomplished thrower in many respects, who obviously got highly recruited and wound up on a mid-grade level, SEC team, which is a major accomplishment for any young quarterback. Sure. And he wins games. Now, at the same time, you watch his game, and from my perspective, I thought he looked like that really smart kid who's in high school who probably has some math ability, but when he faces the Alabamas, Floridas, LSU's, and Georgias, he's now taking physics, and he's not quite grasping the material because he's not willing to do the everyday little work yet to do it. And I can imagine maybe coaches or his dad or quarterback coaches saying, hey, these are some things that you can work on. And he nods his head and is very polite and a good kid and nice guy and acts, looks receptive to it. But you can tell he's not working on it. And when he faces the mid-grade teams or below, he does well. But when he's asked to try and do things and put it together like a kid who's putting together a project and hasn't done the daily work to get it all together, he looks like the dog ate his homework. And years later, I had a friend of mine, Cecil Lammy, covers the Broncos every day, and Peyton Manning apparently had asked Drew Lock, or called Drew Lock when he was drafted and said, hey, anything I can do, let me know. And a 54-year-old man like myself, if I had that perspective in Drew Lock's situation, I'd probably go, can I live in your garage and do whatever I need to do to work with you and learn whatever I can that will help me? And he said thanks and was polite. And 3 years later, when they brought Teddy Bridgewater in to compete for his job, he called up Peyton Manning and asked if he can, work with him some. And Cecil brought that up to his father because he had known his father for a while. And his father said, look, Drew's a great kid. I love my son. I'm so proud of him. He's a great kid. But we've been telling him the same things that I mentioned. You can tell him those things since he was in high school, but he just wasn't ready to hear it. And it took him to get to this point to hear it. And you could see maybe not, but from someone from my outsider's perspective, watching him get interviewed after he helped Seattle win that game, you could almost look at that and say, I bet he's that, like, the light's coming on for him. Like, I almost lost my career because I didn't quite grasp this, because this goes fast, and you don't realize it. And if everyone's telling you, on one hand, there's a bunch of people telling you you're going to be a first round draft pick, you've got it made,
Yeah.
you're great, you're awesome. It's a cognitive dissonance from other people going, you got to work on this. These are things that are going to get better. Or coaches saying, Missouri, they're like, we're doing fine here. I mean, we're not
Yeah.
expected to beat Alabama, LSU, and Georgia and Florida. And I'm not getting recruits who are going to be able to compete with them. So what am I going to do? Get myself fired for benching Drew Lock if
Right.
if he doesn't work on some of the things that we have limited hours to work on, and he's helping us win enough games that we're okay. I mean, all of that, I think, goes into it, and people don't see that, because, like, I hate, I know what you meant by lazy, and totally look at it that way, but I looked at him and I thought I would offer, maybe it's also just lacking maturity and perspective that it's hard to have at that age. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and I think it's interesting because you know in front of him is Gino, right? And that's a guy that for the most part half the league is written off. Um, and you wonder how many of those situations there are out there. And I think what you see, and there's definitely a level in the NFL of coaching that handles all those boxes, checks all those boxes, puts players in situations. And that's why, the unfortunate thing now is that the young quarterbacks, are thrust into the spotlight. Look at the success Jordan Love had. Like,
Yes.
I didn't scout Jordan Love or anything like that, but I know, I think I recall there was, some questions coming out of, I think it was Utah State. Dude, he looks freaking believable. And he's just had masterclass in quarterback for the past, 3 years or whatever it is. There's got to be something to that.
Yes.
Well, there is something. I mean, there definitely is. For Brock, an opportunity to sit behind Trey and uh, um,
Jimmy.
what's his name?
Jimmy
Jimmy.
Garoppolo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, even though it was a short amount of time, that was probably so invaluable for him to see, things that he would potentially do different, and he would, that he liked, take away this, take away that, see maybe the conflict in, the coaching way, the way it was supposed to be done and how maybe they operated it. When I first got into coaching many, many years ago, my high school coach, I remember I started coaching high school football when I got done playing football, and it ended pretty quickly. It just wasn't for me. I didn't want to teach. I just wanted to coach, and that's kind of naturally how I rolled into the quarterback, private coaching world. But early on, I was super frustrated with the staff that I was on, and there was moments where I'm like, I just don't understand why we're doing this. This doesn't make any sense to me. And I talked to my old high school head coach, Andy Siegel, about it, and the best advice he gave me is, like, get a notebook, and every single one of those things, just write it down, and then write what you saw and then how you would handle it, and then just kind of create your little coaching philosophy, coaching approach. And so I feel like that, moments like that for players and coaches and anyone, are so valuable. And for someone, a highly drafted quarterback, those things can be so beneficial for them. Having, gosh, like, when you've been the guy and then you've got to sit and not be the guy, that's frustrating in itself. But if you can find a way to make the most out of it, there's absolutely a level of learning and growth that you can have as a player.
Yeah, I'm a proponent, and often talk about on these podcasts, that I wish the NFL did intermittent playing time for quarterbacks. Just from my perspective, that I think, because you look at and reverse engineer the successful quarterbacks that you mentioned, plus Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, Steve McNair, Drew Brees. Drew Brees talking about how it wasn't Sean Payton, it was Marty Schottenheimer that he credited, because he said I would get benched routinely, and Marty Schottenheimer would say, "Look, you're not seeing the field the way that you were. It looks like things are getting a little too fast for you. We're going to put the veteran in, but you're still my guy. And if we get close, I'm going to give you a chance to win it for us, because we need to give you that opportunity, and we want you to just slow things down." Whereas in contrast, you see Sam Darnold on the sideline of a Monday night game saying, "I'm seeing ghosts," and Adam Gase looks like he's seeing ghosts, not even, and doesn't even say a word to him, and just kind of looks like he's almost ignoring him. And you go, what does that do as a coach, as a, just managing people? So, just to your point about that, if you want to come on that more, great. But if not, I was going to ask you, you mentioned Aaron Rodgers a couple of times here, or referenced him.
Sure.
And, I love how you compared Caleb Williams to to Patrick Mahomes in some respects. There are some things I saw just in terms of how he threw, and some of the things in his bag that physically, or maybe not technically, but like just mechanically in some ways looked like Aaron Rodgers to me. What would you comment about that? How do you see it?
I think, I mean, I've been personally influenced. Now, I don't know Aaron. Still, one of my lifelong goals is to sit down with that guy for 30 minutes. So if anyone listening can get me that, I'm hoping one of our quarterbacks we're working with gets drafted with the Jets. So I'm going to be in their suitcase on the way up there. Just admiring his game and trying to reverse engineer it for so long. Inevitably, we reach a moment in training where there's some emulation and experimentation with techniques that I think he's kind of mastered, and that are noticeable on the field. And I think there's something to modeling your game around particular players. I think in coaching, we call it template coaching. It's a mistake to make, to try to take the template of an elite thrower and have another elite thrower and try to match it. I think there's things we can always learn, but everybody's different, and so systematically how we coach our athletes, and I think why we have the success we have, is because of that individuality and the understanding that, hey, listen, your body can't move in this particular way, so you're not going to be able to approach this throw from this standpoint, or you have these limitations. A good example, one of the early comparisons with Caleb was Patrick Mahomes, and it's an easy comparison, and I don't think it's a lazy one. I think it's an easy one. In talking with Bobby Stroop, who is Patrick Mahomes' full-time trainer, one of the things that Bobby mentioned to me years ago was that Patrick had the most T-spine rotation. He had the most elite rotation in his upper body that he ever measured. And essentially what that means is that if you were to sit on a chair with your feet facing forward and rotate from left to right, there's a point where your body stops and just doesn't rotate anymore. I think that that allows you to do things dynamically on the field that others can't. And specifically, rolling to your left and throwing back down the field. It also allows for a level of, I don't even want to use the word inefficiency, but you can be more efficient with your upper body to overcome situations where you can't be as efficient with your lower body. We always call it like wrong feet, right shoulders. Like you can make your shoulder, your throw correct by utilizing your shoulders. in particular ways. You can overdo that, and you can use it to your advantage. I think when Tom measured Caleb's T-spine rotation, it was the most that he'd ever measured in an athlete. And we were professional baseball players as well. And you're like, is there something to this? And a huge part of our training is T-spine rotation, their ability to rotate their spine. And so it opens up an entire world of throws that difficulty levels, that because the body is able to manipulate in particular ways. And those are the throws that you see Caleb make all the time, where he's sprinting to the left and somehow he throws the ball with high velocity to a perfect spot. He's rolling to the right, creates some space, and he throws it back across his body in a way that just doesn't make any sense. Where, it's a mistake as a coach to try to force feed that stuff down players, throwing, their technique, when they don't have the capacity to do that. And there's also a certain way that they can manipulate their arm with the amount of passive layback they have, the amount of fluidity they have kind of in their joints, the mobility. But I think growing up, if you ask Caleb, his favorite quarterback of all time is Aaron Rodgers. And, so there was things we do in training were for fun. We'd be like, all right, let's do the pop step here. I think for the right guys, that can be, it can open up little windows of throwing. It's like, man, this really makes a ton of sense. We actually had a moment this offseason with Nathan Peterman, who is going into his 8th year in the NFL. He's just an unbelievably educated and smart quarterback. He's a guy that could transition immediately into coaching if he wanted to. And so Caleb and Nate got to work out a bunch this offseason, and became pretty close. But for Nate's pretty athletic. He's not a statue. But there was a particular throw we're working on, and Nate does things the way they're supposed to be done. Like, if you were a coach, you're like, show me how you go on P14 play action. Show me how you take your 5-step and throw this. He's got it down. Like, he understands the intuitiveness and the timing and the play of the game. That's why still, and I know people get like, why is Nate Peterman still playing? Well, because he's really, really good at playing quarterback. The guy deserves another shot, in my opinion. I think he's doing great. And he's improved actually quite a substantial amount from a throwing standpoint over probably the past 3 years. But we were working on this particular throw with a climb movement, and it's a downfield post, and I was like, dude, you should foot pop this, which is the Aaron Rodgers little bounce step that you see.
Yeah.
And I know for him, it's like, that's not necessarily who he is, or it's somewhat unique from a fundamental. Coaches sometimes see that, like, what are you doing? But gosh, it worked so well, and it was so good. And I'm like, see, just roll with that, man.
Yeah.
Do your little A-Rod impersonation. But yeah, like stuff like that for Caleb has always kind of come very naturally, and I think he takes pride in that part of his game. But it's cool to see those, and Aaron's still playing, which is awesome, but hack some of those techniques from some of the great ones. It makes training fun when you can like push the envelope in certain areas.
Yeah, that was just a fantastic like description of everything, in terms of everything that I asked, and then adding on more with it. And I kind of had some laughs with it too, because I think when I scouted Mahomes, I was like, he's a shortstop playing quarterback, and somebody needs to. I hope they realize that they don't want to change him into a traditional quarterback. They want to let him be a shortstop who throws like, borrowed from the influence of his game. So I wondered, the first thing that came to mind when you were talking about this is, well, first was the joke. I remember I mentioned something about Patrick Mahomes on film, and Bobby Stroop laid into me about curvilinear movement, and I laughed because my readers are like, I think the first time they ever heard curvilinear movement was from me, and he was talking to me about how his curvilinear speed was great, and he basically went into me because I said something kind of careless on film, and it was fine. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But I had a good laugh about it because I was like, and I love this guy, but but the what I appreciated about him and what you touched upon was, training a player to maximize what he does well. You watch all the videos of what he does with Patrick, and it looks like what we're doing here is to minimize the risk of injury and strengthening his strengths so that he can be optimized at everything that he does. So then, so my next thought was like Caleb, when you talk about Caleb Williams, did he play baseball? I don't know. I never researched what he does. Did he play baseball in high school and throughout? Was that a big thing for him?
So that's always the interesting question. That's literally the first question out of our mouths, always. But and if you were to build a quarterback, I don't think you have to play baseball, but if you grew up playing baseball in some capacity, it's super helpful. I mean, it's just the most pure throwing game ever. This is how bad I am with baseball. I just learned how many baseball players are on the field at once. I think there's 9. But they're all throwers. Every single one of them is a thrower. And most of them are all hitters in some capacity. So they're all rotational athletes. Whereas in football, there's one. That's the quarterback. Kickers. They don't get enough love. They're rotational. But, Caleb moves and throws like he played baseball, but he was a swimmer.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
How about that? Yeah. So the ability for him to manipulate his spine and his shoulders and angles, I'm like, dang, I never thought about that. But swimming, I bet, played a large role in his ability to manipulate his body and get in awkward positions because of the type of stroke you're doing that built a level of health so that was his.
That makes total sense.
He wasn't a baseball player.
He was a swimmer.
Super cool.
Wow, very cool. So, all right. So I loved watching Anthony Richardson play at Florida, and some of the things that he got to do in limited time this year. There were moments that you're just like, I just was wowed. I mean, well, look, Aaron Donald was shaking his head when he had Anthony Richardson basically, at one point on a throw, and I know he was thinking, you've got to be kidding me that actually worked.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about Anthony, that from what you've seen, and any observations that you care to share.
Well, Anthony is Anthony, and it's funny because I get I've got a bunch of really talented, awesome quarterbacks this offseason, and we had Anthony and Kyle Van Treese last season, so smaller crew, and then Brock the year prior. Was totally different ends of the spectrum in terms of athletic ability, and I say that saying that Brock is still very athletic. He's
for sure.
In the 10, unlike, so when people get off on that tangent, it's like, slow down.
We're talking about elite athletes here. Yeah.
Anthony is, I always joke, I'm just like, we need, if there's a way to capture this kid's DNA, man, and like bottle it up in something, it is unfreaking, like the stuff that he's able to do. Just the raw athleticism, I would argue he's the best athlete in the world. I like, in terms of just the ability to produce force, and change direction, heal, like coming back from injury, and then it is just unlike anything we've ever seen before, unlike anything the NFL's seen before. He's a different cat. What makes Anthony unique, or not even unique, but what's going to allow him to be great and continue to push his game. I'd argue he's one of the smartest quarterbacks that I've ever worked with. His note taking is on a level that would just, it's beautiful. Like, he's got his different color pens and these little, I'm like, dude, you've written a book on like how to be a rookie quarterback. He has a really fascinating and elite level, like, recall and memory, where he'll recall things on the field. He's like, oh yeah, I remember when you said that to me last year. I'm like, oh, I said that to you, or like, he doesn't forget anything, and he's always listening, and he's a sponge. He's a constant sponge. So what makes Ant so special is that he is figuring out how to harness all these powers, per se, right? He's like a superhero, right? That just hasn't quite figured out, but is figuring it out, how to put it all together. And so the scariest thing about him is he's elite right now, but the upside is, I mean, I don't even know how to describe it.
He's my favorite quarterback I've seen since Mahomes. Like, honestly, like, I love Caleb, but of like those three are like my favorite three I've seen in the past 8 or 9 years.
He does things, and like, he told us a story about, there's a play I think it was against the Rams. It was a long touchdown on a seam ball that he threw, and we're talking about something, and it came up, and he's like, yeah, that wasn't even the read. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, that was essentially a clear out concept. It was not, but he's like, I saw the safety creeping down. I was like, is he going to keep coming? And mind you, this is all, he's describing this like it's, someone describing their how, they walked to the corner store and it took 30 minutes. This is in the, space of freaking 10 seconds or 15 seconds. This is all happening with everything else going on. Like, I saw the safety creeping down. He's getting closer to the line of scrimmage, and I was like, man, is he going to keep coming down? It's like, I look over to, I can't remember who the receiver was, but he's like,
Downs.
He looked at me, and I gave him, he's like, I got the little nod going. And he's like, I just dropped back and I uncorked that thing, man. It just ripped, and it just ripped. And super cool moment, because I think things like that, unknowing the story behind it, it's awesome. Watching it on field, not knowing the story, is still awesome. But things like that, when you're playing at that high level at already in the NFL, where you're able to take advantage of miscues defensively, golly, man, that's gonna be tough. Tough for defenses. And I think, like, he's just going to continue to get better and better and better. Someone asked me, he's like, when did you know?
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Yeah. Someone asked me, he's like, well, when did you know? When was that confidence? Well, I think it was his very first game with the Bills. I can't remember if there was a fumble or a pick or something that happened early. It was a preseason game.
Yeah.
But then he, like, just drove the team down the field like it was, freaking middle school ball out there, and he's just ding, 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 ding. So NFL better watch out, man, because that kid is only getting started. And that's why a guy like him, again, like, that's why you draft someone like that number 1 overall, because everything can be wrong and he can make you right physically.
Yeah.
But the longevity of his game and him playing the league for as long as he wants, he's a pro style quarterback. Like, I don't care what anyone says. Like, he operates the game. Now, are you silly not to utilize him in some capacity in the run game? You're gonna, we talked about when teams spy him. He's like, yeah, that didn't work. So he's a different cat, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's the guy that if he was born in, I don't know, Alaska, he'd be the best ice hockey player in the world or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, didn't matter whatever that kid fell into, he's going to figure it out and just be. He's just elite traits, you know, and it's gonna be fun to watch, man.
Yeah. He's
Hoping for MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, and Rookie MVP this next year. So
No, I get it, and that's it's funny because watching him, I mean, the thing that blew me away was how great he was in the pocket. All I kept hearing was he's raw, and I kept thinking, no, maybe he's less experienced seeing certain types of things, but there's a difference between being raw and less experienced. Because the thing you mentioned early in the show that I wanted to touch back on, and this kind of reminded me of that, is that one of the biggest misnomers I hear all the time is, well, you can't teach size, you can't teach arm, you can't teach build. And I get that, but it also seems like if to me, quarterbacking's, I equate it as a former performer. It feels more and more like a stage performance every time I see it. Like it's less, there's science into every craft or performance that you can go into theory and science and technique, and that's all there. But there's also, how do you integrate all that and do that on stage with people watching, with expectations, with interacting with 21 other, bodies around you, and having those types of conversations. And a lot of it's improvisational because you're having to integrate all this together. So when you think about all the things that you have to process and integrate, to me, it's a lot like jazz improvisation, and I talk about that a lot because you have all the theory, you have all the technique, but then you're on stage actually playing. So like, the idea that Brock Purdy maybe leveled up his, had all those skills, but also you're playing with players who, you have a strong offensive line, you have strong receivers, you have a strong system. You're going to level up faster when you don't have to account for screw ups that other people make. You're going to just level up faster. So the other thing is when I looked at Anthony Richardson, it's like his pocket behavior, his ability to manipulate while moving efficiently from the pocket. There were so many players that people lauded that I thought don't even touch him in that area. Like, and so I think sometimes the things that when you said between the ears, what's going on between the ears and the comfort level with spatial awareness that you've had to build up either through training, gameplay, all that combination, that's all stuff that's hard to unlearn if you haven't learned it well by the time you're in the league right now, I would think. I don't know. I mean, to me, there's things you can show folks, but those are the unteachable things, or the harder to teach things from my perspective. But am I off base with that? I mean, tell me, because I want to learn from you with that.
I mean, I think that I was talking to an NFL coach recently about the growth in Jaden Daniels' game, and he kind of remarked on just him essentially willing himself to play in the pocket longer and just do it. And a light bulb went off, and he has the season he has. And I think, that takes someone that has the ability to be self-aware and reflective. You have to own, your weak areas, and you have to be willing to go there. You also have to be talented enough to not be pulled off the field when you're kind of working through some things.
Right, yeah.
And that's the tough thing about quarterback, man. It's like, it's so competitive. The game is so competitive. Coaches, everyone's got their jobs on the line. Everyone's got money on the line. Everyone's got everything on the line. And it's where it's so hard to provide that environment for a guy to just figure it out. But I just, and it's hard. It's hard because there's a decision that you have to make at some point just to slow down and trust it. And then once you go there, you get it. I mean, I experienced it this season with my son coaching. There was a game where I was like, dude, your feet are you're too active too quick. And the problem is that, let's say we were on a 4 progression read, right? And so the 1 and the 2 are kind of together. You can make that in almost one decision, and then you're on to 3. So 3 is really 2A, or it's 1A, 1B, and 2, and then 3rd, all right? And he was too long on 1A and 1B, skipped 2, and then bails out of the pocket and makes some ridiculous sort of 3 for touchdown. It's like, oh my God, like if you just popped your feet to number 2, that would have been a touchdown as well. And so the irony being is like you're kicking the crap out of a team and your quarterback's got happy feet and making ridiculous throws, where the true game is played because against the best competition,
right?
That's just not gonna work.
Yeah.
Work.
Yeah.
And so the next half he comes out and he does like nothing, the right amount of nothing in the pocket, and starts popping through progressions and making these like great second window throws. I was like, he's like, I just had to tell myself to do it, and I'm like, okay, well if it's that easy, just do that from the beginning. So there's a little bit of, I think you see this in Caleb's game. You see this in guys that are athletic, that can dominate no matter what happens. I think there's a video of Lamar Jackson playing like flag football against like 30 kids and just freaking juking them all out. When you can, it's like you have to will yourself back in, to like, I'm going to play the game the way it's played effectively. I say that though, I also think there's a level of your game. You have to also be who you are, right? So is Ant going to drop back 40 times in a game and not run? I don't think he should. Like, I think that dynamic makes him play better when he's out there, when he's sprinting, when he's moving around, when he's doing stuff.
Every performer has their own style. Yeah. It's like you want your, like if we're to break down statistically, like how would you like a breakdown of a game? Maybe it's like 3 design runs, 4 scrambles, and the rest of dropbacks and throws and completions. It's like, and so when you can get that little balance of everything going on, it's really, really hard to defend that. I think Brock in some of the big moments when he ran the ball, it's just like that ability to extend the play when you need it is something you definitely need to have, but you also have to know when to use it. If you go, I think that's where some quarterbacks struggle, and some maybe they don't ever figure that out, and that's why they don't make it. But when you can figure that out, when you can play with that calmness and wait in there to the last, it's like those movie scenes where there's like a bomb ticking and it's like everyone's nervous watching it. And we know he's going to get out, but it's like, come on. They know, like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to set this up so it works perfectly. And then I'm out of here. And so I think understanding that, and some guys, it takes a little bit longer. But they also have the opportunities. I think the coaches have to provide those environments in practice for them to experience that. I tell you this, you're not going to learn that from, and this is my little shot at quarterback coaching, you're not going to learn that from jumping over bags and shuffling through bags. That's not going to create pocket presence, guys. No.
It doesn't do anything.
No.
In football. You can defend it all you want. You can say you're telling me all these NFL teams and all these major colleges, these coaches are wrong. Yes, I am. Yeah. That stuff doesn't build pocket presence. It's not connected.
No.
I don't understand how we can make that conclusion. Even the movements are not even similar to how we move in the pocket. But anyway, that was just my little shot.
No, that's okay, because it makes me laugh, because it's like, another thing that you mentioned was, Brock Purdy taking chances, or Anthony Richardson taking chances and knowing when to do that. And I think that's something that we have to understand too, is, if you're thinking of them as performers, as stage performers, you're going to bomb. You're going to have situations where, I equate them, even if you equate them to comedians. I would joke that Alex Smith was like a great comedy writer with all the knowledge of how to write things, but he needed a laugh track sometimes with the performance things, or he needed somebody else to perform it. Whereas Brett Favre maybe told nothing but fart jokes, but because his timing was so good and his confidence in maybe his confidence in when he bombed a joke that it didn't allow him to like go into a hole. You were gonna laugh, and if you think of comedians and stand-up comedy, I'm sure like whoever you like, who's really good and has their own Netflix special, if you counted how many jokes that they missed that were bad, you'd probably go, "Wow, why am I even watching the show?" But then when you think about how many they actually land and the impact they had, there's a reason why they're getting paid by Netflix to have a stadium tour. And I think that that's the thing with quarterbacking is that you have, when do you take a risk? When do you know when you see something where, like, if you were Robin Williams and seeing somebody make a comment, when do you roll off of that and it wasn't something you planned because it was somebody in the audience and you didn't plant them there? They made a remark that you didn't anticipate, and you were able to work something into that became a huge hit for your show. Or when do you miss on a bunch of jokes and you don't let that affect you to where you're like now got happy feet and you're off, or being able to at least get back on track, when it does happen. And there are a lot of guys that doesn't happen, and those are things that the more comfortable, I would think, the more comfortable you are with all the tools, and you've acquired enough tools, the easier it is, maybe in theory, for you to regain your head. And if you've played enough, for you to regain your head and say, I don't have to get myopic about focusing on any one thing. I can see clearly and go, okay, I just had to calm down. I would have to think that your son, having you as his dad, there's a lot of kids out there that probably weren't going to go, I just had to fix myself and figure this out. There are some kids out there dwelling on, well, God, I don't remember what I was doing here, and then they're fixating on something that it isn't clear. Whereas your son's like, this is clear, and I could just totally articulate to my dad, I just had to will myself to do that.
Yeah. I'll go back to my favorite Brian Billick quote. You can't win with a QB that does what he's told or nothing that he's told. So it's like, if they only do what you're told, then you're not going to win. But if, it's like there's that balance, right? You want that guy that's like, and the moments where it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Oh, that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
I love those moments on the headset.
Yeah. I'll end it on
the head coach is losing his mind.
Yeah, exactly. But it makes sense. I remember my friend Ryan Riddle, who played with Aaron at Cal and Marshawn. He's still their all-time single season sack leader, and so he's played in the league a little bit as well. He played for a number of teams, but he was a defensive end, and he told me a story about his, that kind of fits that theme, just to underscore it and end it on this point, is that he said, so I had a coach who was a wide receiver who was a defensive line coach. This was his first, I think it was his first major gig as a defensive line. He said it's common, you're learning the game and you're teaching scheme. He said, but they had recruited all of us, and we were all these athletic players who took chances. Like, we were good because we took some chances. We identified situations and would create off of it. But he was very myopic to sticking to the game plan and the scheme in all situations. And I would, we would do stuff and he would yell at us and correct us early on in the season. And finally, I talked to my teammates and I said, I'll talk to him if we're all in agreement about this. And they said, yeah. So I went and talked to the coach and explained, I said, this is what we kind of thrive off and do well. And I promise you, we'll do well if you just give us a little bit of room to do that without, threatening to bench us or this kind of situation. And the coach was like, he said, yeah. He said, okay. He goes, but if this doesn't work, we're going back to what I'm doing. And they ended up coming within a snap of a national championship, and they were a great defense that year in the Pac-10. So, and he said, because he always talked about and framing of that when he scouted players, I want guys who can create but know their spots to when they should try and create. Not just do it out of that.
100%.
Yeah. This was great. Thank you so much for doing this. And
it's therapy for me.
Well, I'm glad because it's it's awesome to be able to get to do this with you, and I know that people who have had a chance to listen to this will probably be writing and commenting and loving what they heard. So on behalf of Will Hewlett, is there anything that you would like to share with anybody? I mean, I think you're busy coaching people. You don't really probably give a fuck about what's going on X or Twitter or social media, but
I get lost in there. Just shout out to our crew this year, man. We got Jordan Travis, Austin Reed, Caleb Williams, Davis Brin, Emory Jones. So fingers crossed for this next week to pass and see how that goes. And excited for next year's crew, and then go Jackets, and then go Bulls. Other than that, man, I really appreciate it. It's always fun chopping it up with you. I think you do a phenomenal job, and you've managed to hack a world that everyone tries to keep everyone out of. So I appreciate your insights always. If you guys don't know, our crew, we send Matt, we request breakdowns on players. So if you're listening out there, man, he does it as good as anyone. So I appreciate you always helping us out. Those are helpful. We read them. It's really, really interesting to see, because all that information is great, and how we build out the narrative and understand the areas for improvement. So thanks again, man, for having me on, and until next time.
Yeah, until next time. Thanks everyone for listening.